Hello, everyone. I recorded this conversation with Lachlan last month. He lives in New Zealand and just got consent to build his first WikiHouse. So he's going to be telling us about that and more.
Hi, I'm Lachlan. I'm living in New Zealand. I moved here 2 years ago from Singapore, where I was for 10 years. I did grow up in New Zealand, but I came back with my 6-month-old child, who's now 2, and I have another one on here, and they're wonderful, but my sleep patterns are screwed up. I'm building houses in my hometown. It's a very sunny town called it's called Tauranga in the Bay of Plenty, and we are looking to build just dozens to hundreds of these houses to help reduce the cost of construction in this area. At the moment, I'll speak in New Zealand dollars because that's what I know. The average build cost is around $3,500 to $4,000. And then there's a large land component in the cost of our housing. So it's one of the worst in the world, where my hometown of 100,000 people, the average house cost is over $1 million. And as a ratio of like income, that's like a 9 times multiple to salaries. So it's quite difficult for many people to own homes. So one thing that we're trying to do is densify, because again, like, it's a very sprawling area. Everyone's got not necessarily big backyards, but like a lot of space is taken up by yards and cars. It ends up being that everything's so spread out that all the businesses are failing because there's no money to travel anymore. So hopefully with the densification coming in, we'll be able to help solve some of those other issues too, which would be fun.
Brilliant. So tell me, like, I've never been to New Zealand.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit more about the area you're in. And we interviewed you about a year ago when you were starting up New Neighbour. So I'm going to ask you a bit about New Neighbour in a minute. But
Okay.
I remember one thing you said was about the poor quality of housing in New Zealand. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yep. So the area I'm in is in the North Island. It's a very temperate climate, similar to Italy, because we both grow kiwi fruit. But historically, New Zealand houses had a 9-centimeter thick external wall. So very thin insulation, no floor insulation. It was concrete slabs, so just wicking heat away, and then often low or no insulation in the ceilings. And then every house has just so much glass that you end up having too hot, too cold, like it's never the right temperature. And then because of the way the house structures, it's got like weird humidity issues. So we have had just damp, cold, we call them wooden tent houses, that aren't really fit for purpose. And we have like a 3x higher child asthma rate because of it. There's a lot of problems with New Zealand housing. And while some of them are beautiful and the areas of the houses are in are beautiful, often the actual like quality of the home that you're in is, I would say, harmful to your health, let alone like just not good enough.
So you're talking about quality of housing that's poor, but people are still paying a lot of money for it.
Yeah. Like world-class little prices, just because we have a huge housing crisis here. But then, yeah, I think on most properties, if you spend $1 million on the purchase, I would say 10% of that, maybe 20% of that is the house, and the rest is the land. And even that's probably inflated because it's relative to what a house would cost to build rather than what the house is worth. But yeah, they're not good houses, and I think part of that is that all throughout my life, all of the like home renovation shows focused more on paint and cladding and never on insulation and airtightness and the actual things that make the bones of the house good. But I'm hoping with the new there's a new show called like Green Eco Homes that I think is going to really target the like quality of life features of a home rather than necessarily like whether the paint looks nice. But yeah, it's an interesting situation because they say that housing here is similar to Sydney or Canada or even the UK, but even compared to the UK, the homes are much, much worse here. So poorly designed, and often like not even built to the regulation of the time. We had this thing called a cowboy builder, and I've been told that cowboy is a positive thing in some places, but in New Zealand it means someone that's like cavalier and just like thinks they know everything but doesn't follow the rules, and the rules are often there for a good reason. So it's led to like a lot of anxiety around homes in New Zealand. So yeah, there's a lot of stress around in that entire industry.
So you were saying that you were away, you were living elsewhere. I remember talking to you when you were still in Singapore, when Skylark was launched. So you've come back to New Zealand, you've come back home, and you've started this business called New Neighbour. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so New Neighbour was initially launched to build minor dwellings, which in New Zealand is a secondary or additional dwelling unit on an existing property. And essentially every property with more than 400 square meters of land area in a urban, residential or future urban zoned area is allowed to have a second home on it. And so the intent was that we could provide modular homes that were installed within a week or two in the backyard of existing properties to help with the densification project that's occurring in the country. We're slightly pivoting to build our own project. So we've got a plan for a 5-house build coming up soon, and then 3 to 4 houses on another project. But hopefully can do 20, 30, 40 size house projects in future. So if the minor dwelling project takes off, we'll obviously do that as well. But I think we're going to target full-size houses and probably townhome format, just because WikiHouse especially outperforms New Zealand builders on the 2-story build cost. I think in New Zealand, the expected build cost for the second floor is $1,000 more than the first floor, which with WikiHouse doesn't make sense because you paid for the kitchen, the foundation, and the roof, which are very significant costs on the build. So I think our numbers look like the second floor is actually $1,000 less per square meter, which should have a profound impact on the overall price. But yeah, New Neighbour's hopefully going to be building 10 houses this coming year, and then let's try and triple that the year after.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. We spoke to you a year ago when you were starting off, and since then you've had all sorts of really interesting experiences trying to get it off the ground, get it to fly. And I'm really enjoying following you on Instagram. Your description says construction industry newbie sharing daily struggles, progress, and triumphs. And we've certainly felt it from here when we've watched your videos and just followed your story. So yeah, so tell us a little bit more about how you've got to this point and what you've learned along the way.
So the one thing that my wife always pointed out is that she calls it the tourist tax. I've joined a new industry that I don't know anything about. My previous career was software engineering. So there are many things that I don't know, and I don't know that I don't know them, and that can bite me. And it has bitten me multiple times. But I think I've gotten most of them out of the way. So the last year it's been structural engineer, building a garden studio with a builder and an electrician, architect, designers, and just like getting the council to understand what's happening. So we took, I think, 5 months to get consent where it really should take 4 business weeks. But now that it's done, this council and about 7 others that follow the same rules of 63, so not many of them, but enough of them, should all be happy to use WikiHouse and to provision it, but they were initially very hesitant because it was something new and they didn't want to take liability, which is why business builders insurance exists. So hopefully that will help us for any future build.
Has been a bit of a pain. Tell us a little bit more about how it works and what the concerns were and how you got there in the end.
So the New Zealand consent process is, I would say, primarily outsourced. They've got a system called the licensed building practitioner system, and it means that your builder, your electrician, your architect, your plumber all have licenses, and once they have submitted their part of the build to the consent process and to the council, they take liability for their part of the build, and that. And the purpose of that is that so the council isn't liable for large parts of the house, because we've had, again, the cowboy builders ended up costing the country millions of dollars because they put the liability on the council for things. So it's outsourced to these third parties, but you still have to go through a consent process, and it's not a bad consent process. It's just a little bit unclear what the checkboxes that they're checking is, and I'm trying to gather that for each different council, what the checkboxes are. But essentially, with something like this project, if you have a structural engineer review, or structural engineering report, and a peer review, the council isn't really allowed to have an opinion on the structure because 2 different professionals that they've given a license to and said these people are licensed to build structures in this country have reviewed this and said it's okay. So like their position on the structure is then essentially not relevant. And similar to stormwater and surveying and plumbing and electrician, and they might have opinions on like how far a toilet is from a kitchen, but those are all laid out in the building code separately. But what it means is that if you have a system like WikiHouse, you can get structural engineers to review it and then peer review it, and that essentially makes the council treat it as if it were mostly a normal build, which is giving us a lot more power than I would have expected from what I've heard from other countries where the councils are like, no, thank you. It's too weird. But yeah, that process is quite slow. Initially, the council outsourced it to a third party who does the consenting. And that third party didn't want to take liability and they just ran out the clock. It's supposed to be 20 business days and just didn't do the work. So we got rejected because they ran out of time. And then we reapplied and they waived the first fees. And then it was through pretty quickly because we got everything done, sorted. But it was very strange. We got some like requests for information, RFIs, and some of them were like, you put Bay of Plenty instead of Western Bay of Plenty. I'm like, that request for information is so minor, you could have fixed it rather than telling me. But yeah, we got the consent about a month ago, maybe a little bit more. I've started cutting floors and walls, and I'm just waiting for some insulation to arrive. And then we're going to order the windows for the house tomorrow morning, and they should arrive in about 5 weeks. And that essentially is our limiting factor. So once we have that date in, we can start building the house, because with the windows and doors, we can have a fully enclosed structure, hopefully within like a week of construction.
I have so many questions today. So I know this house is being manufactured right now, but I also know that before the house, you built something called the Jungle Studio, and you were learning as you were building it. Can you tell us the story of the Jungle Studio?
So it's called a jungle studio because it's a garden studio, which I think is a British term. But my wife has a YouTube channel called Kim Jungle. So it's got a beautiful 3-panel pattern on the wall with engraved like monstera plants. But it's a 18 square meter office for my wife to film in. It was an experience. There's a video of us building the platform down the hill and then driving it up the hill on a forklift, and it just like hits everything. I think it cost us like $500 in broken plywood because we broke some stuff, but it was all fixed up, and then the builder had a lot of learnings along the way. So the intent was that it would cost me more with the builder to build the jungle studio, but it would then cost me less on the main house because he's now gone through all the weird questions and understand like what the oddities are. So we had to demonstrate some very strange things to get approval for this, and then also the main house. So garden studios, etc., anything under 30 square meters don't need consent, but they do need to be built to code. So my builder, who's very like careful with his liability, wanted to make sure that we had approval for everything. And so one of them was cladding has to be installed into 75 millimeters of wood when it's attached to a house, and that's a like demonstrative code, but not a performative one. And essentially what the point of that is that cladding should be able to withstand 100-kilometer-hour winds pulling it off of the, is it 100 kilometer? Anyway, very high speed winds pulling it off of the house. So we had to demonstrate that the WikiHouse plywood block with a piece of cladding screwed into it and 100 kilograms of weight attached to the screw would be safe. So we had to do like weird little tests like that to ensure that when we build the actual house, everything is fine for the council. But yeah, it was a fun project. I still haven't done a few of the final touches, but I've been working this last week building like floating shelves, I've had a CNC for a year. This is the first time I've been cutting hardwood. It's always been plywood. It's a very unique experience. I think I really like it. I get why people like getting into carpentry. But it's been really fun. I ended up doing the blocks and then not a lot else on that build, just because the builder wanted to make sure that he could get everything down and figure out what he was comfortable delegating to us, because builders with their licenses charge quite a lot in New Zealand. So our intent is to then have third parties that we pay less, still a good salary, but less than the $85 an hour that builders charge to install flooring and stuff like that. So once we figured out all the different aspects and how they fit into the system, we can then pick and choose which ones we need to ensure that are done by the licensed professional, electrics, for example, plumbing, and which ones we can do with people like me who have will but no licenses.
Okay, so let me take you one step back.
Okay.
I remember you asking the WikiHouse community for recommendations on CNC machine because you were going to get the CNC machine, get it to New Zealand, and start cutting blocks. How did that come about? What was how were you thinking you were going to set it up, and how did you end up setting it up in reality?
So that decision was because my wife was tired of me jumping between ideas. She's like, you have to spend some money so it hurts for you to change your mind. And I did, and I've now not changed my mind. So we reached out to the community. Then a lovely man called Melchior Hoff in Spain helped me get a Blue Elephant CNC machine. That process was quite slow. Their configuration's all done via WhatsApp. I don't love that. I would have preferred like a website, but that comes from China. It's a really good machine. It's got a few oddities, but like I've not met anyone who has a CNC that doesn't have that opinion about their CNC. It does feel like CNCs were left in the 80s compared to like laser cutters. But it works really well. The team is as helpful as they can be. There are some things that they just don't track with. So I'm trying to become a local reseller for them to like have them send me the instruction manual booklets and stuff like that. Yeah, the machine arrived. We just put it in the building. I had to spend like 2 weeks clearing out this big workspace because we had a 200 square meter shed with a pretty uneven floor, quite scuffed from 30 years of metalworking. And then, yeah, it arrived. We couldn't get it into the shed because it was too tall for the door, I think, and then too wide for another one. So we had to put it on a pallet jack, which is the manual one, and then a forklift on the other end, and they just drove it in like it was like a parallel parking. And then, yeah, I've spent the last year cutting out the rest of the shed to be usable as a workspace. But it took, I think, maybe like 6 weeks to like maybe 2 months to arrive. Like it wasn't egregious. In my head, I planned like if I need to buy more, it'll be 3 months, and I'll buy more than one at a time just to make sure that it's like a bit faster. The really painful thing was that the machine cost $21,000 US, and then I paid 10,000, which is like 7,000 US for the electrical hookup. Like the electrician tried to charge 50% more than that again. Like that was the first lesson I learned, is that a handshake quote from someone that your father knows isn't legally binding, and they will try and gouge you. Their initial quote was for £2,500, and they tried to give me a bill for $7,500, and I'm like, please leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you. But we ended up settling on 5, and then I've never spoken to that person ever again. That was my first painful foray into the building industry.
So you were quite lucky that you had access to this workshop space, right?
Yes. So my father built trailers and for orchard harvesting. So he has a key fruit orchard and has always built the trailers for the pickers. And yeah, a lot of experience in metalwork, very small amount of experience in woodwork. But he retired during COVID, and then the workspace was free. It wasn't hooked up properly for electricity, so I have a big diesel generator, which I don't love. But we're waiting because it's a new industrial zone. Our farm has been rezoned industrial. The government's bringing in like bigger transformers, so then I hook up to the grid. But if I pay for it myself, it'll be like $24,000 to get the upgrade, which is, again, it's more expensive than the CNC machine. Like it's so much money for the hookup. But I think the second machine doesn't cost as much. So the problem with the CNC machine is that when everything turns on, it might need up to 70 kilowatts of power to like turn on. And then the running electricity is maybe 19. But you have to provide 70 kilowatts at the start or they won't turn on. So 2 machines don't need 140, they need 70 plus 19 because you can set them up one at a time. And you probably want to have a little bit extra, but it means that, yeah, like the $25,000 for the electrical hookup won't be every single time, but it's still, yeah, it's pretty unpleasant extra cost that I wasn't aware of. But yeah, I think after the second or third house, we'll tear this shed down and build a much more streamlined one. We've got 5,000 square meters to build in, so we can do quite a lot of machines in that space. I think I estimated about 100 square meters per machine would be comfortable. So we could do.
And that's
50.
your storage space as well.
Yeah. So again, it's one of those things where for one machine you need lots of storage, but the second machine doesn't necessarily need 100% as much storage. So you need space for output of the CNCs, but you would just get more deliveries from the plywood companies more often rather than like one big pile. I haven't figured out the logistics of that though, because I think one machine can do a stack a day comfortably. So you're talking about like a truckload if you per day if you had 5 machines. I don't know how much they'd like that, but maybe we'd need a bigger storage again. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
I want to ask you a question about the CNC machine, just because I think one of your latest updates on Instagram was about realizing how many sheets you could cut in an hour, and you had miscalculated that initially. So it actually can cut more than you initially thought.
Yeah, so obviously CNC machines are often like nice and slow, really fine edges, really perfect everything. But with a vacuum table and with structural plywood and with what we're building it for, as long as it's accurate, it doesn't need to have a tidy finish because it's being sealed and then put inside of a wall. So it can cut really fast. So I do full plunge 18 mil with an 8 mil bit, and it rips through an entire sheet in like 7 minutes. And some sheets are faster and some are slower. So if I did a whole sheet of bow ties, that's going to take a while. But you need 10 of those for a house to do that at the end. But yeah, for our walls, for example, if we do two wall faces, that's like a 6-minute cut. It's scary fast, and you're like, oh, I actually can't manage the. So I had always assumed you could have one person managing 2 CNC machines, but I just don't think it's possible. I think it's too much coming out. It's very impressive. I don't know what changed between now and when I first started doing it. I think I got better tools for the CNC that cut better and cleaner. There's a wonderful company in New Zealand called Tungsten and Tool, and they make really good carbide bits with a compression and then chip breaker. And I was trying to figure out what the like trade-off was, because a chip breaker compression bit cuts cleaner, cuts faster, wears less, and I think can cut deeper as well. I was like, no, but there's always a trade-off, but I don't know it. Like they might know it and they haven't told me, but it's like a magical machine. I'm sure it's not as clean as like a finishing bit or something, but for this use case, it's very impressive.
Yeah,
pretty happy with that.
That is amazing. Yeah, please do let us know how you get on with those new calculations for how many sheets you can actually cut per day. I was going to ask you a little bit about the rest of your team, which happens to be on the other side of the world. When I spoke to you last year, you were all in the same place, but you're between Canada and New Zealand.
Yep. So when we first started, this is again mistakes I made. I assumed we would get consent like June last year. So I had Emily and Jennifer arrive for that time period. We got consent a year later. Like it took a while. And they arrived this year, the day after consent was rejected, when we thought we were going to be getting it. I was like, cool, I'll get them to arrive and we'll start building. Don't fly people anywhere until you have the paper in hand. Like it's just not worth it. So this time Jen will be coming back. She's going to be working on this, I think, full time. And we're looking at getting her a 6-month visa to be building more. And then if I get 10 houses the next year, she'll probably be moving here full time, which would be good. But it's been really fun. So I met Emily at university in New Zealand, and she was an exchange student, and we kept in touch over the years. And I bumped into her, or sorry, rather, we hung out in Chicago when I was there for my, again, previous life as a software engineer. And then I was talking about doing this, and then she was like, "Oh, I'll help," which has been really fun. So for the last year or so, they've been doing a lot of the 3D modeling and the design, and even running the CNC machine, because they were trained architects who then got into kitchen design, so have a lot of experience with CNC, etc. Really like the perfect skill set for this, which I think is great. But yeah, Emily's going to be staying in Canada because she's planning a wedding, and Jen will be moving here a lot more full time, hopefully for full time, but we'll see. I'm trying to convince her. And then yeah, we've got a lovely builder who is, we contract to at the moment, but I think once we have full time work, I might have him work full time. And then a local electrician and plumber who I both really like and like get it. Like my plumber sends me eco products and he's like, I love this, you love this, let's do it. It's really fun finding someone that's like as inspired by new technology as I am. But yeah, it's refreshing to not be the person sending the links. Like I'm receiving the links of like corny projects. But yeah,
tell us a bit more about your builder, because I'm really interested in how did you find him and what did he think about WikiHouse to begin with?
So lovely guy. He moved to this area from Auckland during COVID. I don't use Facebook, but my wife found him on Facebook when we were doing like a deck or fixing something for my parents. And I was like, let's hire this guy for a couple of different projects to see if we like working with him and if he's like good rates and does a good job. And then we'll talk about the other stuff. So he was like really good at everything he did. It was more like particular than my parents who were the customer, which I think is a really good trait as a builder. He's like, no, this is going to be done right. So like it's been really good working with him because he's on the surface a very happy-go-lucky guy, and then he's like, oh no, but in the spec sheet it didn't say that, and I'm like, oh, you did your homework. Like he's like really, really onto it, but on the surface is just like a really charming like tradie from New Zealand. Yeah, I'm excited to work with him more. He's like a very fun person to hang out with, and just yeah, really knows everything about everything, which is good. It's especially in New Zealand, a lot of the tradespeople learnt on the job, so often know enough to do what they're doing. And then there are some that have really gone above and beyond to like learn the specifics of like why things work the way they work. So as I was saying earlier, like that question about whether you can attach cladding to a WikiHouse, understanding the rules behind why certain regulations exist is a really useful way of then like figuring out how to solve like the WikiHouse system, how the WikiHouse system will solve those problems, because you know like what the underlying achievement is. So in New Zealand, cladding is mostly to keep the rain off. So if you can do that, then you're usually fine. But yeah, it's interesting to try and like interpret a building code with a builder and have them explain to you why something is a certain way rather than just like doing it. Because often it's very easy to just like do what you're told and do what it says. But if you can understand the underlying like science behind that request, it's a really interesting conversation to have. And he's really good at that, which is fun.
And it sounds like you found somebody who's like been very helpful to like, learn with you as you've,
Yeah.
Are you doing this full time now, Lachlan?
So I have been semi-retired for 2 years, parenting and just like enjoying being in New Zealand. And this has been as much full-time as like it can be, given that I'm waiting on other contractors to be working on it. But yeah, my wife and I both took 2 years off of work to raise our kids. It's been very fortunate and very fun. But yeah, I can't really say full-time because I'm still parenting 4 hours a day during like weekday.
As much as you can, yeah. But
Yeah,
it sounds like you found the right builder to help you as you learn the ropes or the yeah.
Yeah, he's great. He's so good. It's funny, like we finished the Jungle Studio as much as we could, and I'm like, okay, Bryn, I love it. It's great. I'm really happy with where it is. Now, tell me what sucks about it. Like, I want you to critique the work so we can figure out how to do it better next time. And in New Zealand, it's very hard for builders to have that conversation because it's important for them to not take liability for mistakes, like business-wise. But I was like, it's all good. These decisions we made, I made a lot of them. You did what I asked you to do, not necessarily what was the right choice. But I want you to tell me what was bad, what was slow, what you didn't like, so that in future we can like resolve those problems. So yeah, one of the bigger ones is that we attach the interior linings with like pin nails, and in future we're going to use a system called fast mount, so you can like click it into place. You can also then unclick it. So like once the WikiHouse walls are up, you can then just like walk in and click all the wall pieces and the ceiling pieces in, like it's like Lego bricks, which I think is really cool. And just having more of those systems that the accuracy of something like WikiHouse provides, because you know where to put everything, will save a lot of time, and it means that everything looks pristine. But yeah, it was fun trying to get him to critique his own work. I think it's like a natural like response to be like, no, I'm perfect.
Yeah. No, that's so valuable, isn't it? To just have found a partner that can help you with all those things and just be critical as well. So you've moved on to cutting the first house.
Yeah.
Who is it for? What's the story there?
This one is for myself and my wife. We'll probably move out of it pretty quick because it's quite small and we've got 2 kids now. But as a test that was supposed to be done over a year ago, it would have been quite fun to live in. But I think it'll end up being where Jen lives when she's visiting from Canada. But yeah, initially I think it's like 50 square meters, then 18 square meter garden studio will be our home. I'm sure it won't feel so spacious for too long, but again, with like proper siding and like a good outdoor veranda, it'll be quite nice. But yeah, I'm really excited to start doing 2-story bigger versions, just because I don't want to be known as like a tiny house company. Yeah, it should be good. But yeah, the first one's gonna be us. We'll get to experience all the fun and the pain of the system, but it also means that I can like figure out what the issues are firsthand and then resolve them as we go. It's nice being able to be like, I can actually build my own kitchen and then fix something that didn't work.
Yeah.
It's good.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really enjoying following all that on your Instagram.
I settled on WikiHouse because I like the like the microfactory format. So there's been a ton, like a ton. I come from the tech world, a ton of investment into big like housing factories, and the investment needed to build a mega factory that can build a lot of houses doesn't map well to the ebbs and flows of the housing market. So Katerra raised $4 billion and they didn't deliver many houses, because if there's a downturn in the market, you just can't sell enough houses, and like let alone whether you're getting local consent for builds or whatever. I think it's more important to have smaller units that can scale up and down and be converted into building kids furniture or kitchens or etc. Or even just in my case, I can scale slowly, and like if the machine's turned off, it's not that big of a deal. Whereas for these companies, spending billions of dollars means you've got to be running full capacity all the time, or it's like a catastrophe. So I was very wary of the bigger ones. Afterwards, I did find one that I really love called Automated Architecture that does apartment buildings out of not LVLs, cross-laminated timber. It's out of my budget for now, but maybe in future when I can do apartment buildings, I'll look at that. But I actually got into this because I wanted to build apartment buildings in New Zealand, and I spoke to some builders, and they were quoting me $10,000 a square meter cost. So an 85 square meter apartment would be $850,000 to get to like the cost price, let alone what it sells for. And I hate that. My stance is that apartment buildings should be cheaper than houses because there's less land component. So if you've done something to get it to $10,000, it's wrong. So I started this business to kind of learn what parts of the house that I can do cheaper and what will map well to an apartment building. So once I figure out kitchens and windows and all the different components, flooring, that is the same as in an apartment. So what the structure is not particularly relevant, but it'll be good to have both formats, because even at row home format density, so like what the UK has everywhere, that they're like the semi-attached and attached housing, that would be, I think, 8 times more dense than New Zealand. Like our main strip in my town, it's 1,100 hectares, has 20,000 people. Whereas if that was the density of my wife's hometown of Christchurch in the UK, it'd be like 170,000. So like we're just empty space. It's very strange. Partially the geography is very wavy. It's hard to get grid streets. But yeah, we don't need apartment buildings to get to the density we need to be flourishing. So while that is happening, and it is going to keep happening, even just row homes is a really effective way to help solve part of the crisis in New Zealand. Which is
I just did the calculation. So 10,000 New Zealand dollars, that's 4,600 British pounds, which is
that's
crazy.
the build cost, let alone what you sell it for.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's partially because like every apartment had to have 2 car parks, and it costs, I'll convert it for you, £30,000 a car park. So an apartment building has to have £60,000 of car parking in the build cost. It's very difficult to build. I'm hoping New Zealand builds a new city. Like if we just build a new city, we can start greenfields, put in everything first, and then it's probably a lot cheaper. Because right now, like retrofitting into our existing cities means that you're buying up very expensive land from people that know what you're going to do, so they charge you for it, because they want some of the profit, and you end up losing a lot upfront to those speculators. So, for example, I'm looking at buying a piece of property in a very small town nearby. I think the population is like 10,000 people. And for 2,000 square meters, they want 1.2 million New Zealand dollars. So we're looking at $240,000 per house site if we do 5 house sites before I've even paid for the subdivision costs, which is probably 50 grand each. So even by buying some property and subdividing it into 5, my cost for the land is going to be $400,000 per unit. So whatever I build the houses for, it's still going to be $750,000. Like it's very hard to get the prices down when so much of the cost is in the land.
Yeah, that goes back to what you were saying at the beginning about the cost of the land. And were you saying to me earlier as well that before we started recording that you had worked out the build cost for the WikiHouse element, and that how does that compare to like a traditional build in New Zealand?
Ooh, okay. It's hard to compare because the traditional build can be 9 or 14 centimeter thick walls, but I think we're either the same cost or lower than, mostly because we do screw piles. Like its default required, the default in New Zealand at the moment is a concrete slab, but the regulations have improved such that you now need to insulate the slab, so it could be quite expensive. So they have to have like an R1.5 insulated concrete slab that's thermally broken between the garage and the house or something like that. I think especially if you include the construction cost on site, like the amount of laborers on site, I think we're probably very similar in terms of, let's say, skeleton cost or frame cost without cladding, without everything. Especially when you start talking about the second floor. So there are secondary benefits from the block system because you can walk on a WikiHouse roof. Like it means that you don't need to have people carabined all the time to everything. Wrapping a WikiHouse is like a 20-second job because you can just walk around it and it's like solid surfaces everywhere. I'll need to actually do it to get the cost, but I think to lock up, I think I have the numbers here. To lock up, we're like under $2,000 per square meter. Which I think is very reasonable for New Zealand, and that's with a pretty egregious plywood costs. So I'm paying £41 per sheet, and I think the OSB 3 price that is paid in the UK is like 16.
Something like that. It's quite
So I'm working with a European supplier of Kronospan, and hopefully I can get some imported because like a container would be enough for 2 houses, and if we can get that cost down to £20, that's it'll cut that cost by half. It's interesting how much we're overcharged for things in New Zealand because we're so far from everywhere,
because everything has to come from far away. So were you just saying, just to check, where you were saying that you are achieving cost comparability, however, the quality of the traditional housing that you would get for that money in New Zealand will be like very thin walls and just like not very good quality in terms of like comfort, in terms of like somebody actually live, you really wouldn't want to live there. You probably have issues with damp.
Yeah, I would say
like
cladding quality, insulation quality, air tightness, interior linings, kitchen. Every aspect of it is a bit worse than what we can provide, just because we've optimized so much of the like process of the like joinery and of the joinery in New Zealand is cabinetry. I think it's I think it's Windows everywhere else, or vice versa. Um, our final build cost is lower than New Zealand, and I think our structure build cost is also lower. So like on the surface, it's 3 or 4 times more expensive to have birch plywood interior lining than gibboard, but gibboard needs plastering and painting. You got to wait a couple of weeks or a couple of days rather, and then like it's quite a intensive project. And then if you so we don't factor in time or labor costs properly in New Zealand. So I can just go in and clip in interior lining and have it done in a day, and it ends up costing less if you start factoring the labor costs in. So yeah, our final build cost is lower. I think our structural build cost is lower. We're going to have better windows, better cladding. The roofing material in New Zealand is standard. We're not better than anyone else. We will use color steel. This is a strange thing that I didn't realize was strange, but everyone in New Zealand has a corrugated iron roof. It's been the norm for 30 years. It's beautiful. Rain on a tin roof is like a beautiful thing. It's a great thing to fall asleep to, but I've heard that overseas, like that's a very expensive product. Whereas here, I think the cost per square meter is like $22, which is a third or a fifth of what it would cost to use like slate or something else. So yeah, we're not competitive on that, but we are faster to install it because again, it's a sheathed roof. Essentially, the WikiHouse block is a sheathed roof, so you can put down the building paper and the battens and the iron quickly, like very quickly. So like just like installing it is faster. And one aspect I love about the WikiHouse is there's no hips and valleys in the roof, so it's just like boom, boom, cap, gutters, done. Like it's the simplicity of the system and the rigid, I call it the API, the interface for everyone else, means that a lot of those decisions are forcing you to take the smart, cheap path, which I love. So I'll get specific numbers on whether we are cheaper just at a frame cost, but almost certainly. And then if you try and account for any sort of high quality home, we're significantly cheaper. So we haven't achieved Passive House on this first build, but to achieve Passive House on the next one would cost maybe 3% more. And then you like would have no heating bill essentially. Like
Wow.
and in New Zealand to get a Passive House build would be twice the price per square meter. So at that point, we're 50% cheaper than everyone else.
Oh my goodness! Please do keep in touch about that because it'll be really interesting to find out more as the build progresses. I love your description of the API, and I'm conscious that we're going to run out of time in a minute. So I just wanted to ask you one final question because I know in your previous life you were a software engineer. And now you are a builder of WikiHouses. What's it like changing professions like that?
It's fun. Highly recommend it. It is very frustrating not being able to solve a problem by yourself on a computer in a corner. Like having to wait days or weeks for someone to get back to you, exhausting. I did not make a phone call for 8 years of my life as a software engineer. I've now got to make 10 a day. It's the primary form of communication in New Zealand. And like I have to send follow-up emails to clarify what was said in the phone call because I can't trust anyone to like remember what was said. So it's the paper trail is terrible, but it's very fulfilling. So I always tell the story that like I built one company that was sold to Intuit as a software engineer, not as a founder. Built another one that was mine, sold that to G2. Neither of them exist. I worked 70-hour weeks for 9 years. Thousands of hours, and they've been rolled into the software and they've disappeared into the ether. So the evidence of my work does not exist, and I found that very like painful. But with existing buildings, I can point at that and be like, I did that. It's still there, and like you could destroy it, you could erase my input, but I think it'll be quite difficult the more I do. So it feels very good to like be able to look at something and be like, I made that. Even if the builder does a lot of the work now.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, you are.
I really fondly remember driving down this road in town, and my dad would be like, "I built that fence. I built that fence. I built the guardrails there," and like he was really proud, and I was like, "I'm really proud of you." And I just that really struck me, and I love that. Just like you made a mark on the area, which is good.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that with us. And yeah, thanks for your time this morning. Yes. So if people want to follow you, what's the best way? Instagram?
Yep, Instagram, new.neighbour.nz. There's also a sub channel for like toys, so I do like kids furniture and stuff, but it's less fun. It's mostly just fun pictures, whereas the main one is me suffering on a camera talking about mistakes and the
What
experience. But
what's the account for the kids' toys?
New workshop, so everything is new something. So new workshop.nz. I think if we start spinning out like commercial spaces, it'll be new business or something like that. I really want to get into school classrooms. I think it's a really good format. And I don't know, like, I think new school might be taken, but newschool.nz would be fun. I've been speaking to Gabriele about getting a wider span because I think classrooms have to be 8 meters. And WikiHouse at the moment does 5.4 without doing some serious extra engineering. But if you want to solve it, I think there's 1,000 classrooms that need to be built in New Zealand. Should be fun.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for
Okay.
your time. And yeah, we look forward to hearing more from you. We'll leave all your details just below the video so people can follow your progress. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much. I know that I rambled, but it is part of the charm, I think.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back in September. So why not join the WikiHouse community in the meantime at community.wikihouse.cc and see what others are building all over the world. See you soon.